What is going on, everyone? Remix Sports Nation, South Florida, you name it. Welcome to episode 9 of Talkin Track. How y'all doing out there? I'm your host, Armani DePaul, the voice of FMU Athletics and writer for the Daily Downforce. This episode is going to be a little bit different than the other episodes. We're not going to have our usual race weekend roundup or race weekend rankings or, the podium perspective or the Speedway spotlight. We're going to have a little bit of fun in this episode. More fun than I feel like we typically do, even though the last few episodes have been more rant-based than anything. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with this episode. Speaking of the Daily Downforce, I was actually writing for the Daily Downforce, watching the Xfinity Series race at Pocono, writing the recap for that race, and it really hit me that we're basically at the midway point of the racing season. I mean, IndyCar is about to wrap up their series in the next 2 months. The NASCAR playoffs are just a few weeks away, and Formula One just reached their halfway mark in the season. So what better thing to do now we're at the midway point of the season than give out some, I don't want to say report cards because we're not in, well, I'm in school, but we like to say the report cards for the end of the season, if that makes any sense. And I'll maybe make a video on that once we get to each series individual endings. So what we're going to have here is something called mid-season rankings. There we go. And basically what this is going to be is that I am going to take the top 5 drivers, in my opinion, of each series of IndyCar, NASCAR, and F1. I'm going to give you guys my top 5 drivers of the midway point of the season, and then I'll rank them as to who I think is number 1, who I think is number 2, number 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. We're going to do this with, like I said, the Cup Series for NASCAR, because I know I have some friends who have asked me already, why don't you rank the Xfinity or the Truck Series races? I could. It would make the rankings a lot larger, especially, when there's times when there's no F1 or there's no IndyCar. However, I mean, let's be honest here, folks. When you watch NASCAR, you think of the Cup Series. Unless you're a hardcore fan, you're not thinking of Xfinity or trucks. I do, but I like to save the big rankings for the premier series, like the pinnacle of each sport. It's why I don't really include the Xfinity or the Truck Series, because it's not the pinnacle, if that makes any sense. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to start off with F1, we'll move on to NASCAR, and then wrap things up with IndyCar. This is probably going to be a little bit of a shorter episode than you guys are probably used to, because again, this is just a ranking of the top 5, but we're having some fun. This is something a little bit new that I'm trying out with the show. Again, midway point in the season. So without any further ado, let's jump into the first edition of mid-season rankings. All right, folks, Formula One. We are going to kick things off with F1. I got the standings right in front of me, really, so I can gauge as to where I'm going to rank each driver. So I got the F1 standings right in front of me here, right next to my laptop. So let's kick things off with number 5 on this list, and I'm going to give it to the Ferrari driver of Carlos Sainz. Sainz, he's in a contract year. Well, he is in a contract year. He's looking for a new home. We all know Lewis Hamilton is going to replace him at Ferrari starting in 2025 and beyond. And Sainz doesn't look like he's going to get the Mercedes seat. So he's really fighting for his job with every lap, every race that he competes in. He's fighting for his place on the F1 grid because right now he doesn't have one. I mean, assuming, Mercedes is going to go with Kimi Antonelli, the 17-year-old from F2, Alpine, Williams, Sauber. Sauber's probably his best option for long-term stability because of Audi. We know Audi desperately wants him, but with all that pressure on him, his performances have been fantastic. He was the first non-Red Bull to get a win this season. Granted, max DNF, but he was still in contention. And for the most part, when things have gone right, he's been neck and neck with Leclerc almost all season. I mean, I'm looking at the standings right now. Leclerc, he's third in the standings with 150 points, and Sainz is only 4 points back and forth. Everyone likes to put Leclerc on a pedestal. me personally, I'm not the biggest Leclerc guy in the world. I think that I think he's a very fast and he is a good driver, but he makes too many mistakes. And to me, Sainz has what Leclerc doesn't, and Leclerc has what Sainz doesn't. Whereas Leclerc might be faster and have more overall pace and a higher ceiling, Sainz, he's a smarter driver. He'll actually take control of the strategies, unlike Leclerc, and he doesn't make those silly mistakes that Leclerc does, which is what I personally believe takes him out of that true championship conversation. But Sainz, he got that win in Australia. He's 4th in the standings. He could very easily be 3rd, or maybe even cards fall the right way, finish 2nd in the points this year to Max Verstappen. So Sainz, he has had a fantastic year so far, again, given all the pressure he's under, trying to stay on the F1 grid, and he's doing all this. So for me, Carlos Sainz comes in at number 5. The number 4 spot, I'm going to give it to his teammate, Charles Leclerc. I thought about putting Oscar Piastri on this list. Probably number 6 on my list for me. I thought about putting Piastri at 4, leaving Leclerc off. But I do got to give Leclerc credit where credit is due. He and Sainz have had very similar seasons, believe it or not. And Leclerc, like, you could probably swap Sainz and Leclerc and I wouldn't even be mad at you. But Leclerc, he is ahead in the points. He did get that win at Monaco, so finally got that monkey off his back. It's been a really bad struggle for him as of late. I just think that Leclerc's highs are a lot higher than Carlos's highs, if that makes any sense. I think Leclerc, you find him up front more than you do Carlos. And that's where that pace advantage that Leclerc has comes in. And he doesn't have the pressure that Sainz has of trying to find a job. He's in Ferrari for the long haul, but you know, even giving all the circumstance, he hadn't won up until this point since 2022. So, and Sainz had already won twice since then. So really 3 times. So, I mean, since 2022, I mean, Leclerc only has 1 more win than Carlos. So just think about that. But Leclerc, he's done very well. He started to clean up the mistakes that I think really have plagued him all of his career. We haven't seen that much of those mistakes from Leclerc this time around compared to previous seasons. So I think he's finally starting to become that complete package that people want to claim that he already is. So because of that, again, you can swap 5 and 4. I wouldn't be mad at you. I'm going to put Charles Leclerc at number 4. Number 3, and this one is also really tricky. I thought about switching 3 and 2 around. I'm going to give it, this might be a little controversial, I'm going to give it to Nico Hülkenberg. Now you might be thinking, why am I giving number 3 to the guy who's 11th in the standings, only has 22 points, and doesn't even have a podium? Hülkenberg in that Haas. We know that Haas is not the fastest car in the world, but just compare what he does to his teammate. Hülkenberg is 11th in points. His teammate Kevin Magnussen is 16th in points with 5. That should tell you everything. And Hülkenberg, he's had a lot of really good drives. Q3 appearances galore, podiums galore, or not podiums galore, excuse me, but like top good point scoring positions. Like that Haas should not be finishing 6th. It should not be qualifying 6th. It should not be qualifying 7th. It should not be outrunning a Red Bull. It should not be outrunning a Mercedes. It should not be outrunning a McLaren. But Hülkenberg is comfortably doing that. And remember, folks, this is a guy who, before last year, hadn't been in F1 since 2019. Yeah, he was a sub for a couple races, but there's a difference between being a sub for a race or two and being a contender for many, many years. Or, you know, being a full-time driver, excuse me. And he's basically come back like he's Fernando Alonso, like he hasn't missed a step. And then this year, I mean, he's only 1 point out of the top 10. He could put a Haas car realistically inside the top 10 in points. So I have to give him credit where credit is due. He's been phenomenal all season long. And because of that, I'm going to put Nico Hülkenberg number 3 on my F1 power rankings. Number 2 on the list, I'm going to give it to Lando Norris. Now, I know a couple weeks ago, I did make that rant on Lando, basically saying how, oh, you know, basically trying to say that Max should race easier because standing situation. And you know me, I thought that was absolutely ludicrous. But you still got to give credit where credit is due for Lando. He has taken the fight to Max more times than not. Yeah, he hasn't really been successful besides Miami, but he's done what Leclerc has failed to do a lot of times, Hamilton can't do nowadays because of his car. He has really been that thorn to Max's side that we've been waiting for the longest time. I mean, think about it. When we haven't seen Max race this aggressive, this volatile, this just going back to what feels like old Max since 2021. I mean, when Leclerc had that championship level car for about half a year, Max didn't race like he was worried about it. He just kept racing like Max. But when Lando gets into the conversation, you really feel like Max is being pushed to his 100%. That's why I think what Lando is doing is so special. And he could have easily won a lot of these races. He probably could have won Austria. He probably could have won Britain. There's a lot of races that he could have won. He probably could have won Spain. So what Lando's done has been absolutely phenomenal. I don't want to lose credit on that. Yes, he has a lot to work on, but second in the points, clear ahead of everyone else besides number one in the standings and on this list. He got that monkey off his wrench. He has that win already. Everything putting into account, I don't know who else you could put on number two other than Lando Norris, but there can only be one number one. And that number one, of course, has to go to Max Verstappen. Do I really need to say anything else? Most wins in the series, most podiums, 80-point advantage in the championship, probably going to go 4 in a row. He has looked more vulnerable as of late, and that's because the Red Bull isn't like 5 seconds clear of everyone else on any given lap. But still, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's McLaren with the faster car, or Mercedes with the faster car, or Ferrari with the faster car, who's usually the most consistent? Who 9 times out of 10 stands on the top step of the podium? It's Max. It's still Max. Like, if you want to put Lando at number one because of expectations, like you could say, oh, this is what we expect Max to do. Fair. But I do think Max has finally started to silence the critics of, oh, he has the best car. Because he clearly doesn't anymore. I mean, yeah, the Red Bull is still the best car in the field, but it's not clear cut in the way the best cut in the field. McLaren can be faster than them sometimes. Mercedes has won the last 2 races, and Ferrari's still a thorn in their side. To know what Max is doing, given, basically has to carry the team on his own. He doesn't have the clear-cut fastest car, and he's still destroying the field. I don't know how you could put anyone else other than in number one other than Max Verstappen. So for me, Max easily takes my number one spot. Alrighty, let's move on now to NASCAR. And again, we're focusing on the Cup Series. No Xfinity, no trucks. We're going to stick solely to Cup, as we usually do, as we always do. This one I feel is pretty easy. I feel like because really it's been a 2-horse race all year between Hendrick and JGR, really that's all you got to pick from in terms of who the top 5 are all year. Because I think that the 5 I'm going to mention are truly the 5 that can compete for the championship. You got one outlier out there, but he still drives a Toyota. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into this and talk about the NASCAR side of things. Let's kick things off with number 5 on the list, and I'm going to give it to Tyler Reddick. Reddick currently sits 3rd in the points, 23 behind Kyle Larson for the points lead. He does have that one win at Talladega, 8 top 5s, he has 3 stage wins, and he's been in contention to win, feels like every week. So why do I have Reddick at number 5 and not higher? The reason I have that is because Reddick, kind of like that same thing with Lando Norris, he has to learn how to close these races out. He's had the speed to win races. He's had the ability to go out and win these races. But at the end of the day, he only has 1 win on the year. And let's be honest here, folks. If Michael McDowell didn't kamikaze Brad Keselowski, he probably would still have 0. Like, this is a driver that should have probably right now 2-3 wins on the year, and he only has 1. That inability to close out races, I think that will change. I think he will get a couple more wins throughout the year, but I need to see him have that ability to go out there, maybe not even dominate a race, even though he hasn't really done that much in his time with 2311 outside of Coda, but at least show that you could close out a race and take another checkered flag. I need to see that from Reddick before I can put him any higher, but he is still, in my opinion, one of the championship favorites. He's a distant, but I do think he's up there. So I'm putting Reddick at number 5. Number 4 on my list, I'm going to give it to Christopher Bell. Bell sits 8th in the standings. He's got 3 wins, 6 top 5s, a pole, and leads the series in stage wins with 8. He actually leads the series in playoff points with 24 on the year. So why do I have Bell so low on the list if he should probably be 2 or even 1? 2 reasons. 1, Bell started the year pretty bad. I mean, that's the reason why he's all the way in 8th and he's not up in the top 5 with the rest of his teammates. So because of that, he's all the way down in 8th. He had a lot of DNFs on the year, and if we take a look at it, if I could pull up his average finish right here, I will explain. So Bell's average finish is 16.25. Of every driver I'm going to name, he easily has the worst average finish. I'll pull up Tyler Reddick's for you right now. His average finish is 12th. So Bell, he's finishing on average 4 positions behind Reddick. And yes, Bell has the wins. He's dominating more. Like, it feels like he's been able to win like Reddick every single week. But the only thing I put ahead of him over Reddick is that he does have those wins. But with those wins comes DNFs. He's got 5 on the year. Easily leads all the drivers on this list. And he only has 12 lead lap finishes on the year. 8 finishes off the lead lap. He's got to do a better job at, it's like with Bell, he's either up front, and when he's not up front, he's usually running into issues. He needs to learn how to have clean results, whether they result in wins or just simple top 5s or top 10s. If he can do that, he will easily shoot into the top 3 on this list, no question. I thought about putting him in the top 3, but I decided to reel him back a bit, and that's why he's at number 4. My number 3 guy on this list, I'm getting to Denny Hamlin. He's also been on a little bit of a rough streak as of late. I believe he has I think 4 finishes outside the top 10. But Hamlin, 3 wins on the year, 7 top 5s, 2 poles, 4 stage wins, is 4th in the points. Hamlin is another one where you expect him to compete for the championship. You expect him to be in the Final 4. And really, he and Bell have been the 2 premier drivers at JGR. Bell has been more dominant, I feel, as of late compared to Hamlin. But Hamlin, I mean, you just can't count him out. He probably could have won. He probably should have won Nashville, given 5 overtimes didn't happen. So he probably would be at 4 wins by now. And Hamlin, again, he's kind of in that same level of Larson, of Bell, and of Reddick, where he can win any given week. So Hamlin, I'm going to put him in the number 3 spot. Number 2 spot, I'm going to give it to the guy who's second in points, Chase Elliott. Chase has 1 win, 7 top 5s, no poles, and a stage win, and he sits 11 points behind Larson in the standings. So again, why am I choosing a guy who has 1 win compared to guys who have 3? And the reason is pretty simple. Chase has been maddeningly consistent this year. I mean, up until Chicago, he had yet to finish outside the top 19. He was the only driver with an average finish in the 10s. And even that Chicago finish, it was 21st. So 1 more position, Chase's streak would still continue. And the thing with Chase is, some drivers you might say, oh, it's luck with Rex or this or that. I don't think it's that with Chase. Every time you look up on the scoring monitor, he's running in the top 20, running in the top 15, running in the top 10. Is he competing for wins? No. He got that 1 win at Texas, yes, but really, there hasn't really been any other race Chase has really been competing to win at. But look, he and Larson have been duking it out for the regular season championship, feels like, for the past 2 months. And he has really been the only driver that's been able to do that with Kyle. You can't say the same with Denny. You can't say the same with Bell. You can't say the same with Reddick. And that is a huge boost to say that, hey, I can go out there and I can battle points-wise with the number 1 driver in the field and the number 1 driver on this list. So because of that, I feel like out of respect, I have to put Chase at number 2 on this list. So coming in at number 1, who else is it going to be, folks? It's Kyle Larson. Most wins, 8 top 5s, most poles, 8 stage wins. He does have that problem with checkers or wreckers, but at this point, that's just who Kyle Larson is as a driver. I mean, he leads the most laps, probably should have, can win week in and week out, easily the fastest guy in the field. It's Kyle Larson, folks. I mean, do we need to say any more? I mean, it's Larson. There's a reason why people say he's one of the best drivers on the planet. You can't say the same for any other driver I mentioned on this list. So because of all that, that's why I have Kyle Larson at the top spot of my NASCAR mid-season rank. All right, let's finish this off with IndyCar, my top 5 drivers of the IndyCar season so far. I mean, you guys know we've already done it with NASCAR, with F1. You guys know how this goes. Here we go. Kicking things off at number 5 for IndyCar, I'm going to give it to Joseph Newgarden. Newgarden sits 10th in the standings. He does have that 1 win being at the Indy 500, and he's got a total of 3 top 10 finishes on the season. Now, let's be honest, those numbers should be up by 1. He should have another top 10, top 5. He should have another win. However, he was disqualified from the season opening race at Petersburg. That's why he's so far down the list, because he got a massive points penalty. But another reason why Newgarden is at number 5 is because it's really been checkers and wreckers for Newgarden. He's known for his consistency. He has not been consistent this year with a lot of these finishes. Just look at Mid-Ohio, where he was all over the place. Uncharacteristic for Newgarden. Now, we are heading to some ovals later on in the season, so that'll probably change, you know, when Newgarden finally gets the tracks he's more comfortable with. You know, Iowa, the short ovals, even Nashville. He's going to desperately want to win that race. But the reason I thought about taking Newgarden off of this list, just because he's been so inconsistent. But I'm keeping on this list for 2 reasons. Number 1, that Indy 500 win. To go back-to-back in the Indy 500, something that hasn't been done in over 20 years, is remarkable. That has to have some notoriety. And number 2, really, when you think who's going to win the IndyCar race, you think of 3 drivers: Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, and Joseph Newgarden. Yeah, Newgarden has been lagging behind, but I mean, it's still Joseph Newgarden. He's still one of the best. He's still, in my opinion, the best all-around American open-wheel driver. He's the one who should be in F1, in my opinion, if we were going to count F1 as the pinnacle of motorsport. But that's a discussion for another video. For all that, I almost took him out, but I'm going to keep Newgarden at number 5, just barely. Coming in at number 4 on the list, I'm going to give it to Will Power. I'm putting Power ahead of Newgarden for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's higher in the points. He's second in the standings compared to, you know, Newgarden's 10th. And he's been way more consistent. 7 top 10s, 4 top 5s. He does have a win himself coming at Road America. Finally broke that winless streak. And again, that's really the main reason I'm putting him ahead of Newgarden. I think Newgarden has been faster all year. I would still take Newgarden to beat Power head on, one-on-one. There's a reason Power's in contention for the championship, and right now Newgarden isn't. Yeah, you got the points penalty, but Newgarden hasn't really been helping himself with his, you know, Jekyll and Hyde season. And Power's always been this driver. Never the guy to win the most races, never the guy to go out and dominate 5-6 races a year, but will snag that one win or those 2 wins here or there. Always be up at the front at the end in the points. So because of all that, I probably should put Newgarden ahead of Power, but I'm putting Power ahead of Newgarden because Power's consistency easily trumps Newgarden's. Coming in at number 3 on the list, I'm going to give it to Scott Dixon. Dixon on the year, he's got 2 wins, 4 top 5s, 6 top 10s, and he is 4th in the standings. Now, Dixon, like I mentioned, there are 3 drivers you think of when you're trying to decide who's going to win. You got Newgarden, Dixon, and Palou. Dixon is one of them. He's got those 2 wins on the year, and he's just been 1 step behind Palou, but he's still been really good. He's had a lot of great moments. Of course, you go back to those 2 wins that he has on the season. He's one of the greatest of all time. And Dixon, would you be surprised if he, for a good chunk of the season, he was leading the standings, looking like he could get championship number 7? Dixon does have a little bit of work to do. I do think that Palou has surpassed him in the Ganassi rankings, but again, remember, Dixon's like 40-something years old, and Palou is really young. The tide was going to change eventually, but Dixon is not going down without a fight. He is still one of the premier drivers of the sport, and I expect nothing less from a 6-time champion. So Dixon, I'm putting at number 3. Number 2 on the list, I'm going to give it to Pato O'Ward. Now, why am I giving Pato O'Ward the number 2 spot when I theoretically should put Palou, Dixon, and Newgarden, really in that order, at the top 3? Well, let's take a look at O'Ward. O'Ward has 2 wins on the year, 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s, and he's 3rd in points. O'Ward has really been the only one that has been able to consistently challenge Palou, Dixon, and Newgarden all year. Just look at Mid-Ohio. I mean, Palou had a 6-second lead, and O'Ward drove him down. He drove down the best driver in the series like it was nothing, and was able to hold him off. I have concerns as to how he was able to hold him off, but that's more due to the series as a whole. And, you know, O'Ward, he can only do what you know, you can't get mad at O'Ward because dirty air plays a role. He has been the only one to not only challenge the big 3, but consistently beat the big 3. Yeah, I know that first win of the year was due to a disqualification from the other 2. He didn't cross the finish line first, but even then, he could have won in the Indy 500. He could have won a bunch of races this year, and he finally got the monkey off his back, breaking his unofficial winless streak, meaning when he crossed the finish line first, he finally broke that last time around at Mid-Ohio. And We used to say this in F1, but now we got to say it in IndyCar. If McLaren can give him the car to compete with the big dogs, I don't see why Ward can't be a championship contender at season's end. He's done more with less. That is why I have him at number 2. But there can only be one number 1. And that number 1, you got to give it to Alex Palou. 8 top 10s and 9 starts, 2 wins on the year, 3 poles. All the top 10s are top 5s. Only driver all year to lead over 100 laps. And not even close, really. The next closest is Scott Dixon with 90. So that should tell you something. Actually, scratch that. You got Scott McLaughlin, who's actually with 147 on the year. But that's a lot part due to the Indianapolis 500. But really, besides that, kind of the same thing with Larson and Verstappen. What else do I have to say? I mean, Palou, he's the best in the series. He's the fastest every week, week in and week out. You know that he's going to be in contention for the win. You know when you have to win the race, you got to go through that number 10 Ganassi car. He's head and shoulders above the field. He's probably going to end up winning his 3rd championship, 2nd in a row. Palou and Ganassi might go down as one of the greatest duos in NASCAR history. And Palou better be thankful that McLaren deal didn't end up working out, because he wouldn't have had a seat. He'd probably be sitting on the sideline somewhere, maybe with a McLaren driving but in IndyCar. But we see McLaren is nowhere near Ganassi right now, besides a Ward carrying that team. So Palou and Ganassi, that might go down as one of the greatest IndyCar combinations of all time. That is how good those two have been together. So because of that, I am giving Alex Palou the number 1 spot and the final number 1 spot of our mid-season rankings. And that's going to do it. That's episode 9. Again, something a little bit different, something a little bit, unique. We might change some things up next time we do this, probably at the end of the season for each specific series. I won't do it for all the series combined. Maybe I'll expand on, maybe do a top 10. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out when we get there. But thank you guys so much for tuning in as always. If you guys want to follow us on our social medias, follow us on X and Instagram at Talkin Track Show. If you guys want to follow Remix Sports Media as well, follow us on X and Instagram as well. Especially follow us on Twitter, where I give you guys my live tweet race reactions, if you will. Go check out the X if you guys want to see that. But that's going to do it for this episode, folks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we're going to wave the checkered flag. This was Talkin Track here on Remix Sports Media.